Wars, Young Jedi Knights, Diversity Alliance, Chapter 13. Raba sprinted ahead on her long Wookiee legs, leading the way to safety as they fled up broken ramps and half-collapsed staircases in the honeycombed warrens of the cliff-sized stadium. A network of sagging chains draped across the dust-filled crater, connecting to weather building tops on a sinister high-wire network. Raba kinched her ragged headband, once bright red but now faded to a dusty carmine, more tightly around her forehead. She chuffed at them to hurry and continued to lope through the alternating islands of sunlight and barricades of shadows. "Dear me, all this running is beginning to jingle my circuits loose," EMTD said. "I do wish we would pause so that Rabba Cash could explain a few things. I am most curious to know why she would allow poor Master Labaka to believe she was dead all this time." Just then, a series of clattering, rustling noises came from several cliffside tunnels, like the ghostly echoes of long-departed spectators at the great gladiatorial games. No, like marching insectide feet with sharp claws and hard body armor. "And then again, explanations can wait," the little translating droid said. "I propose that we make getting to safety our highest priority." "Sounds like more combat arachnids," Jason said, panting and puffing as he ran. "Lots and lots of them. This place must be infested." "I thought you said they were rare creatures," Jaina snorted. "Now they're a bit too common for me right now." "Hey, it's not my fault," Jason said. "They are rare, but combat arachnids were bred for showcase battles in arenas like this one. I'm guessing that a bunch of them were brought here for exhibition fights. They're probably feral descendants from the victorious ones left by Mandalorians when they abandoned this world." "Survival of the fittest?" Tenelka said, her gray eyes flashing at Jason. "They seem fit enough to hunt for their own food. Us." "Don't worry, Jason Tenelka. I won't let any of them get to you again," she said. She raised an eyebrow at the very suggestion that she would require anyone to protect her now, and kept running. Loey turned around and snarled when he heard something else approaching, something threatening. He pressed a paw against the bleeding gash in his side, ignoring the pain of the wound as he sniffed the air. As Jason turned to look, 3 combat arachnids scurried out of the shadows in front of them. Mandibles clacking, deadly spines extended, positions to fight as a predatory team. "They're in front of us! We're doomed!" EMTD said. A moment later, 2 more combat arachnids boiled out of the chambers behind them, trapping the companions along the walkway precipice that looked out upon the sprawling crater. "Oh no, we're doomed!" the little droid wailed. Raba held her bladdered blaster in front of her. Jaina and Jason, Tenelka, and Loey each powered up their lightsabers again. Raba growled and looked meaningfully, almost apologetically at Lobaka, as if she hoped to live long enough to give him all the explanations he desired. She gestured across the bowl of the crater to the broken building tops of her ship. A small interstellar skimmer waited on top one flat rooftop. Thick dangling chains stretched out from the wall across the yawning gulf, connecting to the distant tower. The chocolate-furred Wookiee bellowed and pointed urgently. "You want us to climb out there?" Jason said. Tenelka strode to the thick corroded chain and grasped it with her one arm. "You can use your force to help your balance, my friend Jason," she said. "If you concentrate, it will be no worse than walking along a forest path." "Forest path, huh?" Jason said with a gulp. "Sure, no problem." Raba bounded onto the chain as the combat arachnids shuddered forward from both directions, their pointed limbs flailing, their multiple eyes blazing with hunger. Loey bellowed and lunged back at the creature, sweeping his molten bronze lightsaber in a broad arc. He lopped off 3 limbs from the nearest creature as they were stalks of grain. The combat arachnid shrieked and staggered backward to one of its companions. The second, already enraged monster struck at the stumbling, wounded arachnid, and the 2 creatures began to rip at each other. Greenish clots of blood flew through the air. The other arachnids ignored their distraction, however, and dove in for the kill, focused on their intended victims. Tenelka stood easily on the rusty chain, legs spread, perfectly balanced in glittering lizard-hide armor. She reached down and grabbed hold of Jason. "Come, my friend, I will assist you." "Hey, thanks," he gasped. "To show you my appreciation, I'll tell you a joke when this is all over, okay?" "That will not be necessary," the warrior girl answered very quickly. "Please, I require no such expression of gratitude." With fluid Wookiee grace, Raba began to sprint across the incredible drop as if the sagging chain were a rope bridge. Her heavy footsteps sent jolting vibrations along the links, and even with the force. Through the forest, it was all Jason could do to maintain his balance. He crept along one tiny step at a time. Jaina climbed up after him. Lobaka, agile from climbing trees and vines most of his life in Kashyyyk, easily brought up the rear. He moved backward along the chain, still holding one hand against his wound and holding the lightsaber in the other. Unfortunately, the thick chains and the perilous height did not deter the combat arachnids. The spined, carnivorous creatures clambered onto the chain as if it were a web they had spun. When the companions had scrambled about halfway where Raba's ship had landed, Loey bellowed an order. EMTD called to the others. Master Lobaka wishes you to increase your speed, but myself would suggest that you exercise extreme caution. We're being careful, EMTD. Don't worry, Jason said, easing forward a couple of steps. That is most reassuring, Master Jason. However, I still reserve the right to express concern about your well-being. As if to make EMTD's point, a cold, dry breeze picked up, howling in open air. Jason wobbled. Blaster bolts, he said, windmilling his arms to stabilize himself. The chains creaked and swayed beneath him. I'm not sure this is such a good idea. Maybe not, Jaina answered, glancing at the chasm far below them. But falling down there is a worse idea. So what are we waiting for? Although the combat arachnids moved more slowly along the chains than the agile Wookiees, they still might be able to catch up with the humans before they reached safety. Realizing this, Loey held his ground, wrapping his Wookiee feet around the links of the chain, bending his hairy knees and holding his lightsaber up to defend his friends from attack. He gestured with his claws extended, urging them to go ahead without him. Raba grunted encouragement to him and increased her speed, leading the way. Tenelka followed, but keeping a careful balance, but Jason had trouble following as quickly. Jaina held both her hands out to steady herself. They crept forward as quickly as they dared, desperately making their way towards Raba's ship and possible rescue. One of the horrible creatures finally reached Lobaka and met it with his lightsaber. The combat arachnid reared up, using several legs to maintain its balance. Its crimson body core glittered menacingly under the hazy sun of Kuar. Loey slashed with his lightsaber, but the arachnid dodged sideways, eluding the beam. In a counterstrike, it swept out a segmented leg and caught the ginger-furred Wookiee with the tip of one foot peg. The blow knocked him backward, and Loey toppled off the thick chain. Jason and Jaina both screamed. At the last instant, though, Loey reached out with his free arm and grabbed one of the heavy metal links of the chain. He swung beneath it, using his momentum to bring him up and around to the other side of the combat arachnid. As the creature stretched down to snatch him, like a fisher trying to scoop meal from a stream, Loey grasped one of the arachnid's stable rear legs and used it to haul himself back up the chain. The arachnid turned, trumpeting in its outrage. Loey swung its lightsaber like a club and cleaved a long gash to the center of the monster's eye cluster. The creature roared and thrashed, spewing venomous saliva from its mouth hole. It took all of Loey's strength to evade the arachnid's attack and reach its body core. Then with a great growl, he shoved the monster off the thick chain. It flailed its many legs, and as it fell down, 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 until it splattered in a starburst pattern far below at the bottom of the crater. Loey scrambled backward, getting to his feet and regaining his balance again as the other combat arachnids hesitated, wary now that they'd seen their Wookiee foe emerge triumphant from battle with one of their kind. Raba finally reached the other end of the chain, where it was anchored to the high rooftop. She sprang from the chain and stood waiting, ready for her to offer her help to the young Jedi Knights. Tenelka moved to the anchor point and stopped to extend her hand to Jason as he inched toward her, trying not to look down. Loey's wrestling match with the combat arachnid had made the chain bounce and shake so much that Jaina and Jason had been forced to spend most of their concentration not falling rather than making forward progress. Now, though, as they neared the dubious safety of the rooftop and Raba's ship, Loey began bounding toward them along the chain, running with uncanny balance to catch up. The two combat arachnids that had not yet given up the chase scrambled after him, hissing and clicking, ravenous for fresh food. Raba yanked one of the small detonators from her cross ammunition belt, set a timer, and, without pausing, lobbed it in a perfect arc. The detonator sailed across the open air. Seeing the glittering object, the foremost arachnid reached up to catch it, as if the thermite detonator might be some sort of flying prey. The grenade detonated, shattering the creature's exoskeleton like 1,000 chips of glass, spraying its innards in all directions. The shock wave from the explosion hurled Jason sideways. He spun, grabbed for balance, and then slipped from the chain, but Tenelka's arm shot out like lightning to seize him by the elbow and halt his terrible fall. Spurred by the thought of all that open air below, Jason and Tenelka drew on the force together to bring him back up again. Then the two of them, along with Jaina, finally scrambled to the sturdy rooftop, where it was safe. Almost. The final combat arachnid, seeing its prey about to escape, increased its speed. It hissed and scrambled along the chain, climbing like a deadly acrobat. Loey bounded ahead, ignoring the gusts of wind, placing his feet firmly from one link to the next. The last combat arachnid closed the gap, its jaws clacking. Loey could not look behind him to fight. His best chance was to reach the rooftop before the creature could grab hold of him. His wound in his side was bleeding profusely now, but the young Wookiee didn't seem to notice. "Come on, Loey," Jason cried. "You can make it." With a final burst of speed, Lobaka leapt the final meters of the rooftop. The last combat arachnid charged forward like a land speeder out of control, but Tenel Ka had thought quickly and efficiently. In a flash of blazing turquoise, she swept her lightsaber downward to sever the ancient metal links that anchored the chain to the rooftop. Just as the combat arachnid reached out to grab for the companions, the chain broke free and fell away with the monster still clinging to it. The heavy links of corroded durasteel plummeted, carrying the unwilling passenger down until it struck the far side of the amphitheater wall with enough force to squash the multi-legged creature. His heart pounding, Jason was relieved to see how isolated they were on this skyscraper away from the walls of the great crater. Lois slumped on the rooftop, shaking and exhausted. Raba came over, put her arm around his shoulder, and gave him a powerful hug. She touched the wound on his side with a groan of concern, then went to her ship to rummage for a medkit. Loey looked up at her, his eyes filled with 1,000 questions. "My, that was exciting, wasn't it?" EMTD said.